Good morning to everyone. My name is Isabel and I'm the director of the International Film Festival and Forum on Human Rights. It's our 17th edition, and finally this year, thanks to my colleague Laura Longobardi, we have decided to try to use this festival to unite what makes Geneva so strong. Our international organizations, the UN, all the people that are present here during the UN Human Rights Council, the NGOs, activists, and naturally our fantastic filmmakers coming from all over Europe to this day. I want to thank you, all the partners of the event, and naturally Laura Longobardi and Ana Castagnosa that have made an amazing work to organize this day. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all for coming here. And I'm really happy to welcome you to this first Impact Day in the framework of the 17th edition of the International Festival and Forum for Human Rights. I've been thinking about this word impact. I think sometimes it's a bit abused. Everybody talks about impact. Impact is in all the project proposals, in the ads, in the reports. When a project has been accomplished, everybody wants to mark a sign in this world and in the activities that they do. But then I thought about all these amazing filmmakers that with their courage and taking risk have made films that have actually really had a real change, social change in the situations that they were talking about in their films, through the alliances that they were able to build with international organizations, NGOs, and all the passionate civil societies who are concerned also by the same issues. They have joined forces, they have made strong partnerships, and they have managed to change things in a long-lasting way. And I think about films that have contributed to reduce the overfishing in the Nordic Sea, or to protect the last mountain gorillas in Africa, or to make aware the perpetrators of rape of the consequence of their violence. So when I think of those films, yes, I think impact is the right word to describe what they have managed to do. And this is what this day is all about. It's about giving the words to these people. As Isabel was saying, at the center, of course, there is the filmmakers and their amazing work, their art combined with the storytelling and with the capacity to dig into real stories. That's really the power of documentaries. But also all these other actors who are so much making Geneva as a city, and this festival as a festival in its diversity, but getting together for a common purpose, which is to make this world a better place. So we really hope that this day will contribute not only to make you aware of what it is, the impact production, which is the capacity of finding partnerships which are outside of the regular and traditional partnerships that filmmakers usually look for in their environments, that filmmakers in the room would be familiar with, but really think out of the box and try to look for those people who really are needed, which are usually NGOs and organizations, to make their films available to those who can actually change things. So it can be opening the door of a Human Rights Council for a screening or a parliament, but it can also be going to the field and going to the communities which are affected with the stories. So that is already a second way to go through filmmaking and impact, by finding a license with those which are experts, either in the advocacy work or on the field, the grassroots activities. So that's already a very big part of what impact means. And the third element are, of course, the funders. The funders are fundamental to make this happen, not only because they bring the financing, of course, but because they bring their own motivations and vision of how these things should happen. So these three elements are the core of Geneva as a city, as a country, and as a festival. And so with this day, we're really trying to unite these actors who are experts in their fields, don't necessarily know always how to talk with each other, which is also one of the aims of this day, to build bridges and to do also a little bit of pedagogy maybe on how to learn to talk to each other when the aim is a common aim. So I really encourage you to talk to your neighbor, the person sitting next to you, and find out what he or she is doing. And probably you're working on the same issues, but really using different tools and different languages. But that's not an obstacle. It should be actually the strength that should bring you to work together, because that's where the power really comes in. So just to briefly to go through what we'll see throughout the day, we have this morning we will hear from different people who have experiences and will share their vision about how to work as filmmakers with NGOs to go and really bring the films where they need to go to make a change. We'll hear from organizations who are always looking for new ways to bring about their mission and their issues. So they also have a vision on how film can help them to do so. And we'll hear from funders, and this is really a world which is evolving very fast. Until a few years ago, there wasn't much funding for the impact, but it's changing, and we would like this to be a mood that comes even stronger, and that maybe comes also to our latitudes. Now it's very much of Nordic and Anglo-Saxon approach to bring finance to impact campaigns, but it's a culture that needs to change, and it's a culture that's changing, so we hope to contribute to that change by bringing these people here with their experience and with what they will be able to tell us and to share with us. So that's for the morning. But then the day goes on, and I think it's really interesting and important to say that this afternoon it's really about this matchmaking and how around concrete topics and around concrete film projects, a lot of people are actually going to make that first conversation, which is to say, okay, we deal with children's rights, rape, and social justice. This film can be a tool. How can we start having a conversation about that? So we've been organizing with Anna in the last really couple of weeks an amazing catalog of projects that have been selected from at least 12 different countries, and they will come here and they really want to meet international organizations, NGOs, associations, to see how that energy can be brought to a much more powerful way to make a change and to make an impact. So the afternoon we will have this session of matchmaking. I also want to say that this event has been made possible with the help of the Federal Office of Culture, l'OFC, Media Desk Switzerland, and Swiss Image, and in collaboration with Avopa and Fonction Cinema, because it's also about bringing to the industry excuse me, here some tools to make their films done and to make an impact. Because it's also about financing. There has been a growing threat in the capacity of good filmmakings to be financed. We know that the public service broadcasters have their troubles. We know that also the power to bring stories to the screen is becoming more difficult from the financing point of view. So all these coalitions is also about thinking out of the box and finding new ways to bring financings in the production and in the outreach. So the morning, I've been organizing this morning with Doc Society. Doc Society is a British foundation which is based in London, but also New York and Amsterdam, and they work globally to finance, to support, and to train documentaries, independent documentaries. And Nicole van Schaik, who is Director of Development, who was supposed to be with us and who was of great help for putting this morning together. Unfortunately, she had an accident and she can't be here. So when it comes to bring you to what it is, impact production, because Doc Society is really, I would say, the organization that has modeled this kind of profession, which is becoming more and more common, and there are more and more people who are being trained to do that. So I'll try to do it on her behalf and to put you to this crash course of what it is, impact production. So it's mainly for the producers or filmmakers in the room, but I think it will be interesting for everybody, because as you will see, and as we will go through the rest of the speakers of the morning, you will see that this is really a key person, a key figure in putting all these different partners and needs together around a campaign, which is the impact campaign. So I would like to start with the PowerPoint, and I think that here there will be the seeds of the discussions that we will have during the day, and I hope that you will find some keywords that will keep on coming back during the day with the different speakers and the different examples that we will show, because the idea is really to show you examples of films that could make this difference, that have made this difference, and how did they do? What are the ingredients which are needed for an impact campaign to be successful? And hopefully that will give you some ideas on how you can contribute to a campaign with a film. How can you use a film as a tool for social change in your respective different activities? Because it's the diversity of this room, which is the diversity of this festival as well, that can really make a difference, and we hope this can happen. So I talked about briefly about the documentaries. Documentaries are at the core of Doc Society, and so we chose for this first round of the Impact Day to stay on documentaries. Their power to connect and to really bring a story across, to put faces and to put stories on issues, which means that people will care and then people will take action, which is an amazing tool to bring change, because then people will feel that they are concerned and they will find a way to do something. So that's really why documentary in particular, but films in general, are such a powerful tool for social change. So as a filmmaker, especially as a filmmaker, and in order to develop an impact strategy, you really need to ask yourself the questions, because that's where you need to ask yourself what are you making this film for. And we've seen that filmmakers are becoming more and more ambitious with what they want to do with their films. So they are becoming more aware of the power that they have in their hands. So they are no longer just wanting to make a film, but they wanted to make a film for a reason. I'm not talking about all the cases, but in some cases, that's how it is. So in order to do that, it's very important to do it right. And it's very important to do it by elaborating a strategy on which are the organizations that can help you go to that objective, how can you work with them, and how can you reach the impact goals with those means that you have. But what is impact at the end? There are these three key elements that I was mentioning before in terms of people, but they are really the key elements that make an impact campaign a successful campaign. At the core, there is the art, there is the film, and there is the reason why a filmmaker is doing his film. But the impact is really reaching the right people at the right time, those who can make a difference. And of course money, as I was mentioning before, that's a key element to keep in mind if all this has to work right. Because it means following your film for another year or for several years, and of course this has to be financed in a way or another. But as a filmmaker, you really need to ask yourself the questions that are on these slides. That's really the first starting point. What are the key issues, the messages of my film? What are the change goals that organically lead from this narrative? Who is the target audience who must see this film? This is really a key question because that will really bring you to develop a good strategy. How can I reach them? That's the partners that you will be looking for. How might this film play a role in the context of the current movement? So be aware of what's around when you think about your goal, what's already being done and what has been done. And who are the change partners who could use this film in their work? Again, partnerships, but also supporters that can bring your film to the right audience. And what resources do I need to meet the potential? So that you will be looking for expertise, influence, networks. Everybody can contribute in a different way. It's not just about money, it's really about creating the right partnerships to go to the right target. Documentaries can make changes in different ways. So the four main ways in which they do that is by changing minds, so creating awareness and understanding of something your film talks about, changing behavior. It can be for people to act different, to buy different, to have a different type of behavior in different situations of their life, which can make a change. Changing structure, maybe a law can be changed, maybe a structure can be changed, maybe a system of an organization can be changed. That also has an impact. And of course, building communities, because in the process of doing this, also the process is a change in itself, because people get together, they learn how to work together, and that already creates a community that you can build on for the future. Very, very important is mapping the issue. Once you start working on the project, which is on an issue, then who is there already? Who are the key organizations? What are the campaigns that are being done? Who's funding that kind of issue? What's going on around you? Because that will drive you, or will drive the impact producer, towards the right people and the right organization. And that really also means that you should be aware of what's already going on, so that you don't overlap, but you build synergies with those who are already active on that field. This is a gold mine. Doc Society with other players in this area, they have built this impact field guide, which really, if you're interested in impact production, can drive you through all the process, from strategy to building partnerships to funding the money. Everything you need to know is there. There are lots of case studies which are just incredible. You have the trailers, they have produced some reports on the result of the impact campaign. So this is really something which is there, it's accessible, it's on the web, it's in 4 languages. They're, by the way, looking for translations in French, so maybe that's something we could talk about, how we can contribute to that French version. But this is really where they have compiled all the experiences of the last 10 years on how to work on impact with films. So I really encourage you, if you're a filmmaker or not, I think it's also interesting if you're not a filmmaker, to go there and look what's possible and what's been done to give you an inspiration of, if they've done it, we can do it. And to inspire even more, I would like to show you the first clip of one case study that was done by the American filmmaker Lee Hirsch. It's about bullying in the United States. He was bullied himself when he was in school, and he really wanted to make a film to have this stop. And I hope you will feel inspired by this clip. Thank you. We can show the clip.
I have been speaking to
the last couple of days, we had heard that Tyler had his head shoved into a wall locker. He said he's a geek.
My concern is that you were making someone feel so uncomfortable they didn't want to be in school.
I feel kind of nervous going to school because I like learning, but I have trouble with making friends.
So he said he's a geek. Some kids had told him his work was to go hang himself. And I think he got to the point to where enough was enough.
Tonight, a tragic situation.
A Perkins boy, just 11 years old, believed to have been desperate enough to take his own life.
This is an awfully complicated and difficult issue.
Kids will be kids, boys will be boys. They're just cruel at this age.
Here, what we get is nothing's wrong. We didn't do anything. Everything's fine.
They punch me, strangle me, take things from me, sit on me.
Give it to him hard!
He's not safe on that bus. I've been on that bus. They are just as good as gold.
My voice is not going to fall silent. I will go to my grave until a difference is made.
For once, there is something, a tool, a resource to show what children are enduring, the effects it has on them, what work we need to do inside our public schools, and if we don't, the end result of what will happen.
We need to learn how to love one another and accept one another and teach our kids.
But I think now people are really dealing with it and looking at how it affects their life, the fabric of their community, the fabric of their school, asking questions. Kids are getting engaged and trying to come up with their own solutions.
You know, to take something that is accepted as a rite of passage and to ride that wave onto into every middle school and showing this film and giving kids and teachers the vocabulary and the means with which to stop these cycles, I thought was amazing.
Be the difference. Go out and find that one child, that new kid standing over there by himself. Be willing to stand up for him.
Everything starts with one and builds up. Eventually we have an army.
If we all do it together, we will change the world.
One of the things that most impressed me was the full spectrum advocacy campaign that went on using the film and around the film. Every kind of tactic and tool was used effectively, and with a very ambitious goal to shift culture.
I just had a chance to see Lee Hurst, the director of Bully, who's here, and we thank him for his work on this issue.
So, as you can see, there is no target that is too bold when you're thinking about impact. I think that's really the first thing that strikes me when I see these examples, is that you really have to target very high and say that's where I want to get, and it has to be a very bold target, because with the strength of being together, amazing results can be achieved. So now maybe you have understood a little bit better what an impact producer does. As much as the film needs a producer to go from creatively and financially to go from script to screen, a film needs a producer to go from completion to impact. So it's really about putting all the efforts together and what is needed for a film to be used in the right way and to be put in the right hands for it to make an impact. So an impact producer needs to fundraise, needs to secure the key partners, needs to execute and oversee the delivery of the campaign, and needs to evaluate the campaign. So it's really the manager of what happens with the film once it's been completed and until it really delivers its impact. And you will see from the cases that we hear later on that actually this can take years, and which is great, which means also that the power of the films can last much longer than the traditional distribution that we see from broadcasting, festivals and cinema. So the life of a film can be much longer when it travels in different hands than the traditional distribution of the film. So where do you find an impact producer? There are different models, and here there are four. The most common is that really it arises from the team, from the film team. Somebody who is in the team takes responsibility for the impact. That's the most common approach to it. But it can also be freelancers that are hired on a specific project, can come from a partner organization as well, if they are experts on specific fields that you want to touch with the campaign, or in some cases a firm, a company is hired to deliver the whole campaign of the film, including the impact producer. But this is the slide that I really like, because it really shows that at the core of everything and what we're talking about is the film. We talked about art before. Film is that piece of art with a commitment to tell the stories in a very engaging way. And that's really the most powerful tool that you can use whatever you're doing with that issue if it's done well. We are talking about cinema, we're talking about films that can really touch the souls and the minds of the people and encourage them to act. So the film is at the core, and it's the glue that really brings together all the organizations with their different motivations, with their different way of working, but that's really at the core, and the impact producer is the person that connects all these different elements around the film. The next couple of slides are really useful for those in the room who are not producers, film producers, because they really show in how many different ways an organization can contribute to a film before it's finished and once it's finished, besides the financing. The financing is an important part, we talk about it, but this is really the different ways in which you as a small NGO, an association, a grassroots movement can really be relevant and important for a campaign, for an impact campaign. So this is during the production, the research material, you're the experts on the field, you know the context, you know the people, you have the access, so that's really valuable. Film archive, photographic, a lot of films of course use archive, that's also very valuable, and it's sometimes a big part of the production budgets as well, so in a way it's money. Of course access, you are on the field in remote and complicated places to access to, so you can facilitate that. Stories, you can also bring up stories from the field because you're there and you know them, so that's really useful. Introductions to prospective funders, you're looking for money as well, so it's that connection can help and benefit the filmmaker if you're working together on an issue and on a project. Promote the film, so really spread the word, how that can travel throughout your networks, that's also useful. Crowdsourcing campaign on specific parts of the campaigns, give feedback, or of course develop the impact goals, because again, each one has their own expertise and the NGOs are the experts on the field, so they know what's needed on the field when it comes to impact. And when the film is completed, again, that's another moment in which the different partners can bring a lot to the table and to the filmmakers in terms of contribution. The mailing list, donors, it can be a way in which the donors can give to a specific course. Training tool, we will speak about that a little bit later, but training and pedagogy and learning is of course a very natural way for films to be used. Lobbying as well, when you know organizing a screening at a council or at a parliament is a very strong way to open a discussion. When a law is going to be discussed, for instance, that could be a very nice way to open up. Create study guides, integrate the film in your campaigns. You will need that as a tool, but it's both ways that it's useful. Organize screenings for your members at your conferences, etc. So it's really not only about I can't participate because I'm also looking for money. It's about bringing each one their own expertise and capacity to reach different targets and different audiences. So the Good Pitch, some of you might be already aware of the Good Pitch. The Good Pitch is the flagship event of Doc Society. So it's this amazing experience for all the filmmakers that have gone through that, and some of those who will hear about today have been there to do a strategy and to develop their impact campaign and then connect to the right people to implement it. It's a 6-month-long program, so the 6 projects are selected every 6 months, and they are trained for that period for their campaign on their specific project that have been selected. So it's really a crafted work around the projects that have been selected. So develop the strategy, map the landscape, and all the things that we've seen before. And at the end, there is a live event. There is a public pitch in which the organizations that have been contacted through the 6 months come to the table and talk about how they can contribute. For those of you who have participated to traditional pitch for producers, it's a completely different atmosphere. It's really about how can I contribute, how can I help, what can I bring, who can I connect you to, rather than giving not always constructive feedback, let's put it that way, to the filmmakers who are pitching. So it's a very constructive experience and very useful, and at the end you have your impact strategy and your partners hopefully around the table. And it's proved its success. These are some of the films that went through the Good Pitch. Maybe you will recognize some of them. A few have actually been screened at the festival in the past years, so they are really the type of films that we look for also as a human rights festival. So, and they're, of course, great films, so lots of awards, nominations, and which means an exposure, and which means an outreach, which is quite impressive. Since 2008, that's when the Good Pitch started, 4,800 organizations have been through the live event. So that's also about pedagogy. That's also about learning from different sides how they can contribute and how they can be involved in a film project. So that's going on and still goes on in 60 countries. New partnerships, I was saying before, a lot of new connections that brought to real collaborations, and also fundraising, because some of the organizations which attend, they can finance, and they do, and that means really unlocking a very precious resources for the films, for the reasons I was saying before, and for the fact that following a film for a long time needs resources. So that's really another way to look at financing in a non-traditional way. And so out of these films, there's always a campaign. So that means that the outreach has been quite incredible. So the Good Pitch is a model that travels the world. Besides the events that they do in Europe, they do in the States and all over the world. There are side events that are organized locally. So that means that the outreach is quite impressive. And most of the campaigns that have gone through the model are in fact very effective campaigns. So I would like to share with you a couple of case studies and clips before we move to our guests, to our speakers. So the first one is the campaign that was done around the film No Fire Zone, which was directed in 2013 by Callum McRae, and tells the story of the final 138 days of the 26-year-old Sri Lankan civil war, where between 40,000 and 70,000 civilians died. So the film is not just a call for action, but the impact campaign was to hold the Sri Lanka government accountable of war crimes during that hidden war. And I would like to show the clip, please.
There was this large crowd of people pleading with us as the UN, please don't leave. And suddenly your organisation that you had faith in to help in times of emergency was pulling you out.
The government regarded the UN as impediments to their conquest of the Tamil Tigers. By removing those organisations, there were no longer international witnesses to what was happening.
All of a sudden, bullets will come in, like firing right into the people. You're left knowing that they're going to die. There's nothing we can do.
The government were determined to finish the LTT off militarily, no matter what it cost, including in civilian lives. They didn't believe that anybody in the international community was prepared to stop them, and they were right.
This is the film that is leading the way, and I think people have to support it and get behind it and spread the news.
In just 2 weeks' time, world leaders will gather in Sri Lanka for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit. Those leaders, including David Cameron, travel in the face of continuing protests over the appalling human rights record of its hosts.
Did Sri Lankan government personnel and security forces kill the NTT chief Prabhakaran's 12-year-old child in cold blood?
The whole situation puts enormous pressure on India. The fact is that India is the main and most important country in this entire debate after Sri Lanka.
I'm very clear that we need a proper independent inquiry into what happened, particularly at the end of the war, where Channel 4, through that excellent documentary, have shown some truly chilling and appalling scenes.
So this film, No Fire Zone, is credited with playing a key role in the United Nations decision to set up an international inquiry into Sri Lankan war crimes. And then I would like to show you the last clip from a film that was presented at the festival here a couple of years ago, The Borneo Case by Dylan Williams and Eric Pauser, which follows a group of activists investigating profits from illegal logging that has destroyed more than 90% of the Malaysian Borneo rainforest that have then been money laundering around the world. The third clip, please. Vous avez le clip Borneo Case? Sinon on la passe après. We can show it later. Does it work? Okay. We can show it later. Because now we have some very strong and interesting case studies from the people who are actually produced them and directed them and made the impact campaign. So it will be such a valuable experience that we'll hear. And also a very interesting experience on how to work with the NGOs on the impact. So I would like to start with Ilse van Velsen, who is a director, producer and impact producer with her twin sister Femke. They've been working for 10 years, I think, in Africa, and they've told some wonderful stories with their films that have really reached very impressive audiences, not only in terms of quantity, but of the people who were targeted for the campaign. So I would like to give the floor to Ilse. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I can't see anything. It's all black in the audience, but I know you're there. Yes, so during this presentation I will take you along in the actually 18 years that me and my sister have been working, making documentaries, directing it, producing it, but also setting up really big impact campaigns. If my presentation is working. that would be helpful. So I'll start in the meantime. If you can get my keynote up, that would be great. There it is. Great. So for the last 18 years, we've been working mainly in Africa, making social justice documentaries. And the reason why we started this adventure was while we were making a small documentary in South Africa. That was the first thing that we did. And we were making a film about youngsters growing up in the townships from different economic backgrounds, but they all had in common that they joined up and made radio together. So while we were back in the Netherlands, that's where we discovered the power of film. We got the film premiered, we worked together with NGOs, together with their help. They got the youngsters, the main characters in the film, over to the Netherlands, and there was media attention. So we had a debate afterwards, and during the debates and afterwards, the organizations also started to work with these youth and organize projects for them. So that was for us the start, and also the key way for us working forward as filmmakers. That impact and making impact, setting up impact projects was really the core of what we thought was most important. So what we do is we first make a film for an international audience. So we've made several films. We made Return to Angola about underage refugees returning back to Angola when it just came out of the civil war. We traveled up to the Congo where we made 3 documentaries that I'll tell you more about the impact campaigns later, about sexual violence and the consequences it had for rape survivors, but also we made a film Weapon of War to really ask the perpetrators themselves to look at the core of the problem, because we believe that you can really only truly change things if you also look where it actually comes from. And later on we decided to make a documentary, Justice for Sale, that has been, I think both films have been screened here at the festival, to look at the corrupt justice system in relation to sexual violence. And most recently we've made a documentary, Haunting History, in South Sudan, about the war that has been raging over the country, and about reconciliation and trauma healing that we are at the moment in the process of setting up a 3-year impact campaign. And at the same time we're working already for 3 years on a documentary in South Africa on the huge impacts privatization of our security has on human lives. So what I said is we first make an international documentary. I think that's a traditional also way of filmmaking, and then you screen it at festivals, you make sure it's broadcast internationally as much as you can. But for us, vital is also what Laura already talked about, to bring it to the policymakers, to make sure that there are dialogues with UN bodies. So what we did here in Geneva with a few of the films, but also with Weapon of War, for example, we targeted armed forces to talk with them, or with governments, and see how we can work together or change minds or policies. So during the rest of the presentation, I will go into 2 of our big impact campaigns we have set up. And the first one I will start with the documentary, Fighting the Silence. So this documentary is really about the consequences for survivors of rape, and the consequences it has to be raped, but after that to be stigmatized by society. And we found really brave women to step forward, share their story, and to be role models. So I'll show you a short clip.
De milliers de femmes au Congo, chez nous, qui sont victimes de violences sexuelles causées pendant la guerre.
Nisi tulisitoka tulikuwa tunatunga mgongo kwa ukuta mpembeni, mnatoka mwingine, mnatoka mwingine, mnatoka mwingine, mnatoka materi sasa ni kusema sema siwezi kanywa vile pakaanza chani na manguo, kwani machana manguo ngode ananiweka
Mvilaji mkosa vile kiso. Na wakaikana nao vile tu hivi fulani batachangia na FDD fulani basi ile yote ikaonyesha sema antuka mtu atakaa na mke itakuwa sawa vile mtu anakosa amani kwa hapana. Omwanya kuna na
hiyo njoo na mimi naweza nikaichangie. Hata basi naseme wanajeshi wa Kongo wanashiriki. Hayo ni kawaida. Kwa sababu walikuja kufunzwa na nchi zingine za kigeni, ndio maana hiyo ubakaji huko ndani ya Kongo.
Huko naona mwanamke msoko shipe hii iko inaonekana. Ile yote Mungu anataka unaona.
Hakujawa sababu yoyote ambayo inaweza kukubali ati mke amebakwa kwa ajili ya hiyo. Hakuna sababu. Hakujawa sababu.
Vitendo mbaya tu ina vitendo iko inaendelea kwa kuingia bwana anaeleza ile kubaka mwanamke bila sheria mwanaume. Hivi tukutumana nani vile furaha zaidi kwa
tunanyanyasika, tunapigwa na waume zetu, tunabakwa, lakini wamama wengi wanaendelea kunyamaza na kujifunga na ile matatizo ndani ya moyo. Na kwa leo na yeye yuko katika wale wenyewe walishavunja shene ya silaha.
Okay, so while we were making this film and working with different women groups and talking to a lot of different rape survivors, and they also asked us the question, well, can we use it as well? We're willing to share a story, of course, to a Western audience. They agreed on that. But so we thought, yes, of course, you can use the film, but bringing back a film, handing out DVDs in rural areas with no electricity or infrastructure was, of course, not going to work. So it was quite practical to bring it back in the form of mobile cinemas. But before we wanted to do that, we first had to go back and show the film to all the different individuals that spoke out in the film. Because, yes, they agreed for an international audience, but with the taboos and stigmas in their own country were so big, we didn't know if, you know, telling their story in their own back garden would be something that they were willing to do. And it was really nice to actually go and travel back to all the places and show it with them. Is also how they received the film, because they had worked with us, but they didn't know that we worked with different people as well. So for them it was also really interesting to understand how this film came together and that there were actually more women like them that were also speaking out. So in the end, everyone agreed, men and women, that they wanted to be in the film and that they wanted to carry sort of that role of role model in the Congo. So what we did next is we set up a workshop where we invited about 20 local NGOs, all working in the field of sexual violence, and sat down with them for 5 days to evaluate the film together, to watch it, because the film was watched for a Western audience. So I think if you bring it back to a certain audience, your new target audience, you have to also see, does it fit? Do we have to make changes? Some things they know, but the Western audience doesn't know and need more explanations. So I think it's good to always sit down and really talk, and definitely talk with your grassroots organizations and experts to do that together with. It was also a form of making sure and to create ownership, because we would organize the cinema, we would organize the films, we would set up the project, but in the end we will leave. And it's really important if you engage organizations from an early stage and make them feel part of it from the beginning, they also feel proud and feel it's their project as well. And over the course of years with numerous other impact campaigns, we've noticed that that really works and is a key to success as well, and also a long life of your project. So we sat down and simple things we evaluate. So we looked at the film and we asked them, okay, so what should we change if we bring it to like big mobile cinema screenings where you have young people, old people, men, women, all coming together. So, for example, in the film Fighting the Silence as It Is, you have a little girl speaking out. She was raped, but in her wording she used the words, "And then he fucked me," which would be really inappropriate to use those words in a big crowd, because the risk you have at the end of a screening, you might have a discussion about those words and not about what the purpose of the whole screening and the debate afterwards should be about. For some screenings we had to dub it back in other local languages. So those kind of small adjustments we did. I think this was a film that could go back in most of its form back to the community, because it was about role models and only Congolese people were speaking out. So that's what we did. In September 2008, we launched the first mobile cinema screening, and I'll show you a clip how that looks like.
Il y a même des hommes qui considèrent des femmes comme des objets, des personnes qui n'ont pas les mêmes droits et qui ne sont pas leurs égales. Et que donc toutes ces réalités encouragent la femme à se taire, même lorsqu'elle a commis le viol. Ce film me montre des femmes courageuses qui ont été victimes de violences sexuelles, qui racontent comment est-ce qu'elles ont été violées. Et les films montrent en même temps les conséquences sur elles, sur leur famille et sur la communauté.
Kila mtu alikuwa anapenda mwenzake atoke na aingie. So nilikuwa naona ile kitendo inanitendea mbaya, kitendo mbaya sana. Sikuwa napendelea kwa ile kitendo inanifanya.
L'importance du débat après le film, c'est le fait que plusieurs personnes qui participent à ce film ont été d'une manière ou d'une autre victimes des violences sexuelles. Et grâce au débat, ils ont un espace pour s'exprimer et c'est très important par rapport à l'objectif que nous poursuivons.
Sababu tuna maulizo ili tuwe na uhakika kwamba umesikia yale ambayo tulikuwa na nia ya kuwafunza.
Natera hamwe na raia na baka, lakini mie niendeza penda vikue bapinire wale benye banenda na viole banamuki.
Watu wanaanza kubaka kwa sababu anasikia kama ni kawaida. Na kila mmoja anapatikana, hakuna mtu anaadhibishwa, hakuna mtu anaadhibiwa sawa vikali, anakuwa anaona sawa ni bure. Ijiforce sana kwa kufuata walimu.
Au Sud Kivu, il y a des parties que je suis en train de voir sur la carte ici qui sont des milieux très reculés, où dans ces villages-là, les gens n'ont pas facilement accès à l'éducation. On leur donne la chance de voir, d'entendre, de partager l'expérience et on les aide à changer leur perception par rapport à la question des violences sexuelles.
Donc inafaa kuingia kabisa ndani kabisa watu wetu wakona tena mahali kwa kunyuka hiyo. Kwa sababu unasikia polisi aliwa, unasikia sivili aliwa. Sasa uniambie itaisha na inaweza isha.
So it's not just only screening a film, because then it would be a traveling festival. Like, what we find important is to work with the grassroots organizations and to really embed it in a bigger program. We're talking about highly taboo issues, so you have to take care and take responsibility as well, what the power of film can be and how people can react about it. So what we do is we make sure that when the cinema travels to a village, local organizations will be contacted as well that work in the field of sexual violence. They will then as well, when there's in the course to the preparation of the screening, people will go around. There will be announcements also on the radio and talking already about the issue. When the screening actually is there before the screening, all different organizations will represent themselves. So if after seeing the film, people feel the need to come forward, but the cinema moves out to the next village, people know where to turn to. And it's still being used. It's not being used anymore as it is 10 years ago in the big form, but because we also set up smaller cinema kits and handed out to local organizations so that they can actually start using film instead of using drawings on flapovers, because it's so much more powerful. Local organizations are still using it, and it's still spreading over the Congo. I think by now 2 million people have seen the film, because the audience you will reach in those remote areas are a lot bigger than you will reach here. Like, we have screenings where 10,000 people would come to, and people would walk like 50 kilometers to see the event. Sometimes they would maybe not expect a film like this. Maybe they hoped for Jackie Chan or something else. But in the end, the discussions that followed afterwards, people that are expressing their feelings, that has been really powerful. And because in the film you have role models, a men abandoning their wives after they've been raped, and then of course at the end of the film they understand that they actually shouldn't blame their wives, but should take them back. And these role model examples have made people really understand after seeing the film that that is actually an option, because before that a lot of men just, this is culturally done by the community, so it was not even discussed about. So I think in that sense it has showed us how powerful it is to open up debates and discussions. So while being in the Congo longer than we had expected, we in the end made 3 films, never intended to, because we were so involved and talking with women, we also had the question, while seeing the military and rebels going around, they're the rapists, but why? And at that time, this question, focus was really heavily growing on rape survivors, but hardly anyone was focusing or asking these questions to the men. So that pushed us to say, well, let's ask it ourselves, and that's why we made the documentary Weapon of War. I'll show you the clip. And again.
Kama mwili unasikia inakupuse uonane na mwanamke, hautakuwa na maitrise tena, direct unaenda mtafuta.
Tutasema kama ile violence sexuelle ndio silaha yetu kubwa.
Kesho na mkamati hivi na mwenzako tia mkono huu na manguu na mnaikali, kisha mnendo mnafanya.
Si vous parlez avec les militaires qui disaient que partout où nous passons, si nous avons vaincu nos ennemis, les femmes deviennent comme des butins. Donc, on traite les femmes comme une chose.
Ce force. Mungu tunataka tunaendelea na shirikina.
Mina regrete sana kuona ilishi saa bet ni hana akili haikuwa inatumika tena sawa ya mtu watu sawa ya nyama ya pori.
wakangoma hesa bahatizushi zemani sushi aunoku orumi akaba amisha ganika residencia orumi amisha garipsi.
So when we were making this film, we knew that, so we again screened it internationally and went to a lot of policymakers. But we also understood that if we would bring back this film to the Congolese community, they wouldn't benefit from it because they have lived through this. They know what happens to them. But the problem, I think, in the Congo was that the national army was the biggest group of committing rape. But nobody was doing anything. There were no programs with them, for them. Nobody was working really, really with them together. And the National Army wasn't doing anything. So we decided, okay, if we really want to make a change, then we should work together with the Army and see if we can educate by film the National Army and its own battalions to talk about it. So we sat down with the National Army and worked together with the Congolese government to create new impact projects with them. So while discussing it with them, we also knew bringing back Weapon of War in its full form is not going to work because it's made for an international audience. So there are too many open doors for the soldiers that they will kick in and use to not discuss what they should discuss. Also, in the conflict setting that the country was still in, showing an hour film with a battalion would be too long. They wouldn't have the time to sit down for 1 or 2 hours. If something would happen, they would have to all leave. So we said, then we should make shorter films on different themes and really go deeper into the theme. So we recut it and used all the material that we had from Weapon of War, but also that we could reuse that we shot for Fighting in Silence. And we added new material to it. We filmed and we recut 6 new films. For example, one film was about really showing them the consequences of rape. Because what they do, they go into a village, they'll take whatever they want. Women are war booty, so they can do whatever they want. They never have to look back. They're never being confronted by those women themselves and by the stories. And what we noticed when we were doing these screenings with them, I think that's what happens. Like, if you would sit in a room with these soldiers showing the different films and having debates afterwards, it would just open this little door, because I think that's the power of what film is doing. It will plant something somewhere. And maybe the door doesn't open immediately, but the images will stick. And maybe a second time, with a second film, when we slowly start to talk about it. Or what we experienced is that the soldiers didn't have to talk about themselves immediately. They could talk about the soldier that was speaking out in the film. And in that way, they opened up, in a way, also sharing their story, but they didn't have to immediately tell it about themselves. And those things have helped to break open the talks and the taboos. Also talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. Many soldiers suffering from it. Also one of the characters in the film, but it's not talked about at all. They had no clue what it actually was and what the effects were. So by seeing other soldiers having the nightmares and effects that actually all those things that they did and they saw during the war also personally affects you. So you're not only affecting someone else's life, but by doing those things you also affect yourself. Those discussions we had with them were very interesting, and the military has worked really well with us. We didn't train moderators like we did with other mobile cinema that were just civilians or people from organizations. We had to train facilitators that were army personnel, because they wouldn't allow civilians talk, it would have more effect. So we recruited several military that were actually starting to become the facilitators of these programs. And I will show you a clip how that looked like as
well. Un militaire qui n'est pas pris en charge, c'est un danger pour la société. Raison pour laquelle nous devrions éduquer les militaires que quand ils combattent, c'est pour sécuriser et les femmes et les hommes. La femme ne devra pas être prise comme un instrument ou un outil qu'on devrait violer, l'esclavage sexuel. Alors il fallait éduquer les militaires pour leur montrer que c'est très dangereux pour eux, pour la société et pour les familles aussi.
Akanibana, akanifanya vitu vya mbaya, akaniambia hivi, kuoa na kulala chini. Nilikuwa kama nachukua hivi nani hiyo mguu akaanza kunifinya hapa, ndio alinitonga.
Mais huyu nini penda influence kama mfano viole c'est l'opinion nini pende kwa influence kumie kwa kufika ke mwasi wa viole bona hiyo penda makanisi sana ngote ba ni influence viole yaka ni mlo bayo kwa majoro
ikoki na ba conflit ilikuwa mu pays conflit ina créer maintenant ba groupe armé ou soit ba bandi quelqu'un peut se séparer avec sa famille anaenda kupoli juu aliiba tukilikuwa hivi anaikala kupoli kwa hiyo anaikala hakuna nini akiona tu mwanamke kama ni plage kama ni fasi ndani ya mashamba anampokelea anamviolea
mule militaire ndio sababu kwa tusoke uzala ke kama kusali za mabe musanya nako
mtu aenda kutonga ndako ndio mtu na msusu abandakana nini nafo fondation pilier oyo esili sécurité na makambo malamu na kati na mokili ezalani neti na babani na yo po ete yo okumba kita kati na bato ezo.
So it doesn't always have to be that your complete film is going to be the film that you're going to make your impact campaign with. It's fine to adjust it or to recut it so that it's actually going to have more impact for the goals that you have. That's also what happened with A Hunting History. This film was about this new nation that was started in 2011 when South Sudan got its independence. So we followed the life of a human rights lawyer that returned back to the country and had to deal with all the traumas of his past and try to reconcile with it. So in 2015, we did a good pitch in Oslo where we pitched the impact campaign. But what was happening then afterwards was that there was a new war, like quite a heavy, destructive war raging over South Sudan, changing a lot of things. So we had to adjust our impact goals and impact project as well. So at the moment, like I was in South Sudan last week and we're just kicking off a 3-year project where we're actually going to recut again and create a new kind of documentary using the old footage and same way we've done it with the other project. So this was last week. We teamed up with the Norwegian government, or NORAD. They're actually the funder that are funding the whole project. We have a Dutch NGO, PAX, and we have a local NGO, Amalna. And together then with 20 local NGOs, we are defining what the best stories are that we should tell. They're also helping us with finding the stories because they're the experts. And what is, I think, really powerful again is to engage them at the beginning, so they feel it's their project, because we will move out in a few years' times. And if you create the tools in a right way, you can reuse it years and years and years and years to come. If the foundation of this project is solid, because everyone understands the way how to use these films, how to moderate, we can start make new films, because new issues that have to be addressed. So you can make it a really long-lasting project as well, when everyone understands what you can do and how you can use the tools. And if we tend to call them tools, like the videos, can used in a good and strong way. And that brings me, I think, to the last slides, working together. So we have always worked together with NGOs, government agencies, to make our documentaries. The first 3 documentaries, feature-length documentaries we made, the ones that were all set in Congo, we didn't work together with co-producing or traditional film funds. We actually got NGOs funding together the film, and then later on got them engaged as well to help us set up these impact campaigns. And there is still always a bit of a worry, can you have your films, can it be funded by an NGO? Is it then, is there not a conflict of interest? Will you have freedom still to make all your artistic decisions? Well, my experience is yes. How we said it, we just applied for funding, and a lot of the NGOs were not doing any films, but they were interested in the topic, and they did understand that if we fund a film, we will have a film that we can use later on. And that was really successful. They would give us a grant, and they would only see the film when it premieres. So it was total freedom. Making those films, I think, were the most free way of making films. Later, of course, we have co-productions. We work with the traditional film funds, but setting up these impact campaigns is always together with government funding or with the help of NGOs. And it can be in the forms that I just told you, but at the moment we're working on a huge impact campaign on the South African story. And there we also, it's not always have to be money or networks. It can, we're working together, for example, and talking with Amnesty International, because they have huge grassroots sort of groups that can help you to find your audiences in the different countries. I was here yesterday and I talked to unions to see if we can, with global unions, to see, because it's concerning workers, to see if we can engage them through their networks and see how we can partner up with them. And I think the interesting thing, even though we're very experienced in setting up impact campaigns, every film asks for a new approach, or you have to invent the wheel new. You have a blank page. You have to see, okay, what are my target audience? What are organizations working in the field? Who can help me with funding it? But who has other resources or networks that I can actually use for? So even though maybe a lot of organizations have never worked with filmmakers, sometimes it's as new for the filmmaker as it is for the organization. But if you both see the potential of a film and the strength of a film, I think then you can come both a long way. And I think that's what this day is about as well, to talk about this and openly. I think we have a panel discussion where I'll be in as well, but I think it's, ask as much as you can, and hopefully at the end of the day we are all a bit wiser of what the impact is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilse, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions, but we will take a few at the panel discussion a little bit later. And as I said in the beginning, this is really, the whole day is about networking and connecting. So there is a lunch, a networking lunch. We have plenty of time during the afternoon to talk to each other. So if you have the time, stay along, because it's really about asking questions, understanding how that works, and seeing what else is possible, because the results, as we have seen now, is really about bringing a real impact on the places where the stories come from, and this is really very strong. So we'll now go to our next case studies, which comes from France, which is not yet, I would like to say, typically a country where impact production is in the habits of the producers, but our two speakers today, Valérie Montmartin, the producer, and Madeleine Leroyer, the director of the film that they will present, they are advocating for bringing it much more in France, and I hope in the countries which are not yet familiar with this. So I would like to welcome you both on the stage to present number 387, which is just about to be finished, I think, and the impact campaign that comes with it.
So I'm Valérie Montmartin, the producer of the film number 387, and I'm the head of Little Big Story based impacts.
And I am Madeleine Leroyer, the director of number 387. So just to be very clear, the film is not yet a film. It's not out, it's in post-production, and the campaign is in the making, and everyone is welcome to join the construction of the campaign. But first, we need a film.
Yes. At the very beginning, there was an idea making this film. So Madeleine, tell us, what is this film about?
So on April 18, 2015, an overloaded migrants boat sank 70 miles away from the Libyan coast. At the beginning, people said over 800 victims died in that single shipwreck, making it the largest peacetime mass disaster in the Mediterranean. These victims, coming from at least 15 different countries, are at the center of an unprecedented identification operation, unprecedented when it comes to migration, and this is the core of the film. I hope we can play the trailer, please.
Stiva 387. I love you.
In the film, we follow the efforts by the Italian forensic anthropologist Cristina Cattaneo from the University of Milan and José Pablo Baraibar. You've just seen a glimpse of his face. He's a forensic coordinator within the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross. Of course, you people in Geneva know very well what that is. Together, they're trying to give these people back a name, a dignity, and give answers to their family because this work is being done with and for the families. So from Europe to some of the countries of origin, mostly Mauritania and Senegal, we follow this quest, this search for identity. In 3.5 years' time, we can see very well that what is special about this film is that it's not yet another film about migration. It raises questions that go far beyond this topic. What defines us as human beings? What's the value of life? And what is this world where in life and in death, some people, like you and me in the room, have rights and some don't?
These questions were the basis of our willingness to act and impact with this project. First, we took the film to a world tour of pitches. ITFA Academy, Dock in Thessaloniki, Hot Docs, Sheffield, Sunny Side of the Dock, Nordisk Panorama. Each time we convinced broadcasters, some of them are here, to join the project. We also met a lot of organizations that back up the impact. One of the most important for us was Chicken and Egg Pictures. It is an American organization which supports young female directors, first and second documentary, but it's also an organization which defends human rights projects. We knew, as French people, that such an American grant was not really created for a French team of filmmakers. As everybody knows, that in France we have a lot of public support, and that's not the case of US filmmakers. We met Chicken and Egg Pictures team 3 times. I was very lucky because Madeleine speaks perfect English, Russian. She also speaks Polish very well, and now Italian very well. So I set up a trick. Madeleine had to speak Russian when we were with someone from Eastern Europe, Polish with a Polish, English with an English, and so on. She could not look French. Finally, we were selected.
Okay, so yeah, but that makes us very proud because we were the first French film selected for the Accelerator Lab, and I'm immensely grateful for that experience because so we were 10 films directed or co-directed by women coming from India, China, Romania, Sweden, the US, and France. We spent quite a lot of time together during 3 retreats, 2 creative retreats in upstate New York and 1 more market-oriented that took place in Sheffield during the festival last June. The idea, it's very American, the idea is to find yourself in a safe place, which is quite unusual for a French. So in a safe place where you can reflect on your storytelling. I see French people laughing in the room. Okay, so you can reflect on the storytelling, you can reflect very deeply, and also on what is it you want to do with the film. And what was super interesting for me was to see that the American filmmakers, for lack of public money, have to be super creative when it comes to funding. And so for them, at least for the ones in the cohort, impact is not the cherry on the cake. It's not a pretty word. It's deeply rooted within the making of the film because they have to bring in partners who become the stakeholders of the films and of the future campaign. And that made me look completely differently at all the work I was doing backstage. That is the work you won't see on screen. Talking with activists, with people within the ICRC, the forensic unit, negotiating access, talking with grassroots organizations in Senegal, and all of these people are waiting for the film. So here I was, okay, this is not just the new trend, it is already planted, seeded within the film.
In December 2017, we've been also selected to the Impact Workshop organized by IDN. This 4 days workshop were very useful. The workshop was on the internet, so it was free. It's a good thing for producer here in the room. And at the end, we had a kind of text about the impact campaign. It was a very, very good step for us to think about it. And we sent the project to Good Pitch Europe, and then we were selected, so special thanks to IDEM.
I remember one of the hosts of this online EDN workshop was Ben Compass. Sorry if I'm scorching his name. He's an impact producer in the UK, and he said, dream big, think big, because, well, you know, the reality check will come soon enough, so now is the time to really think out of the box and think about what is it you can do with the film. And I think this was really key to bringing us to the next step of Good Pitch. So when we were selected, it started with a 4 days lab, and I was away filming, so Valérie left to this place in the middle of nowhere called Putin, and I don't know what they did to her in this Putin place. But when she came back, she was like, impact is life. So now she wants to bring impact to France. And
yes.
She started.
Yes, in Putin, you will have the chance to meet experts, the other selected teams, but also impact producers and teams of filmmakers who have already had an impact campaign experience. During 4 days, you confront your ideas, and you can take inspiration from experience of the others. Yes, really, it's one of the strongest experiences of my life.
So she was all about it, all over the moon, and the magic of it is that it's not only a lab and then a live pitch. During the 6 months between that lab and the pitch, you basically have the people, the amazing, wonderful, marvelous people from Doc Society and Good Pitch working for the film and the campaign. Emails, phone calls, they have this gigantic address book that they open for free to you, and they kick ass at bringing people who usually would not even open, you know, the email, like, hello, I'm trying to find support for the film. No, so they were great, and the event itself, as Laura said, it was so different from a traditional pitch. It looks like a traditional market pitch, 7 minutes, but it's completely different. You have 300 plus people in the room, international organizations, grassroots organizations, advocacy groups, single individuals, funds, I mean, great people, and they are here to support you, and some of them, they do really have the best job on the planet. I don't see David. Are you here, David? Yeah, so that guy.
Nina, you're also
yeah, David and Nina, and among others are the kind of people who can publicly say, I'm in, I'm joining the campaign. In the case of David, that was over 250,000 euros for the campaign of Arica against toxic colonialism. So big exists, you know, back to this idea. And so we continued the path. Valérie was in Biarritz with the support of the team from FIPA-DOC in January.
Yes, thank you to them.
And now Geneva. Geneva is for us, we know it's the first Impact Day, and we're very humbled to be speaking on stage of a film that you've not seen yet and a campaign that is in the making, but Geneva for us is truly the place to be. The ICRC, who plays, we can say it, the lead role in the film, is here. It's the humanitarian capital, and I very much hope some of our major impact efforts will be happening here in Geneva. You'll hear from Mary Wernster later on today. She's been with us at Good Pitch, so I think we're very happy of this mutual trust and support relationship.
So the impact campaign is?
Yeah. Let's talk about something.
We hope.
It's called Numbers into Names. The goal of the campaign is to advocate for the right of dignity, the right to dignity and identity after death. The problem when you talk about identifying missing migrants is that there is no system. There is no system to bridge the gap between the victims whose bodies are recovered either on the northern shores of the Mediterranean or on the Thousand Shores, and their families disseminated in 15, 20 different countries of origin. Inspired by the work of some of our characters and the ICRC, we believe that this system could be the Central Tracing Agency. Central Tracing Agency was created to trace prisoners of war, and now I don't want to spoil anything, but I think they're really thinking on how to reinvent tracing and adapt it to the challenges of missing migrants. I personally would very much want to bring a special cut of the film in the countries of origin and in the places where I've worked, so I think I'll spend the rest of the day with Ilse, stealing all her ideas. This is beginning, and I hope we'll discuss further.
Now we have a lot of questions: how to organize our impact campaign, when should we decide to launch it, how to manage the problem of the budget of the campaign. So the film is cut, and the editing is now finished, so we can have a strong strategy with festivals, and we have also 15 broadcasters on this project, so it means a huge impact potential. We have the support of RTS, Swiss broadcaster, and Arte France also. For me, the experience, the impact means to be in adequacy between what I produce and what I defend. It's also a new skill, but first, it's very good experience for me, very strong.
I think I see the campaign as the very natural continuation of the work we've done so far with the film. The making of the film was a catalyst or an accelerator in the very life and work of some of the characters of the film, and I want this energy to expand further with the campaign. So the making of the film is nearly over, but I won't get the baby blues because I won't stop. I will continue with the campaign, and I very much hope we can do this together and bring and turn more numbers into names.
Thank you.
The guy who has the best job on the planet.
Thank you so much for this other example, and good luck with the campaign, which in a way continues today and in the afternoon, and which leads us to a very nice transition with the third part. The third part of the morning session, where we are going to hear from the activists, mainly the international organizations, those who work on the field and in the places where the decisions are made and can open those doors that you were talking about. So we want to hear also what is their motivation, why they are involved with films. What do you think what do they think the potential of the films can do to their objectives and to their missions? And I'm really happy to bring to the floor Mary Burns, who's been just mentioned right now, because she's Deputy Director of Operations in the International Committee of the Red Cross, and she just recently decided to join the campaign of number 387, so you will tell us a little bit more. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I can't see any of you. I'm very happy to be here. Big thanks to Laura, whoever Laura is. Thank you, Laura, for having us along and guiding us through this. Thank you as well to all of the filmmakers for your work and for your work that really matters to the world and matters also to humanitarian organizations like my own. This is one of my favorite topics. The question of how can art and documentary film influence behavior? How can it bring about change, social change and behavioral change? I want to talk about why film makes a difference, and I'll be referring a lot to the discussion we were just having around the film number 387, because that's the one that I know the most. At the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, where I work, in addition to addressing what you probably all know, the tragic consequences of conflict, we work to limit suffering and to prevent violations. We go to great efforts to bring about changes in behavior. We work on developing laws that regulate warfare. We talk to everyone. We talk to militaries, we talk to armed groups, we talk to governments. We influence policymakers, we influence states, we influence people who have power, and we work directly with communities. We have many ways of doing this, through persuasion, through mobilization, through dialogue, negotiation, but also with radio broadcasts, social media, loudspeakers, posters, brochures, but also clips and films. ICRC and most NGOs are always looking for new ways to communicate. But one of the questions I ask myself is whether we're making the most of art, of film, of theater as strategic tools to try to influence and to change behaviors. Perhaps we have tended in the humanitarian field to focus our efforts a bit too much on explaining ourselves, on explaining our services, maybe even on advertising our own work. Today's different. We start here with issues, a social issue, as seen and as defined by the filmmakers. The collaboration with Madeleine and Valerie on film number 387 is unique for the ICRC because we did not commission this or co-produce anything. We tried to jump on board with the work that was already ongoing. It's the filmmaker that takes us through a very complex topic on missing migrants. Documentaries are excellent for storytelling, we know that, but even on issues that are hard to talk about. Film is a powerful medium, and importantly, one that is accessible, widely accessible. And to my mind, film is important because of the way it touches us emotionally. So it's from this space, from emotional connection, that art and filmmaking specifically can inspire change. So how does film inspire change? As I said, by touching us deeply, by telling us a powerful story, by bringing it up in close, by acknowledging people, recognizing them, humanizing them, by immersing us in a complex human issue, illustrating the interconnections and root causes, by bringing us by bringing us new views, new understandings, and amplifying voices that are not always heard, stories forgotten, stories neglected. And these stories inspire change, I believe, by building from empathy and prompting the listener, the audience, to act. Film inspires change by bringing people together, by connecting us, and by not allowing us to distance ourselves from the other, be it the terrorist, the migrant, the refugee. By providing nuance and not allowing us to simplify or see things in black and white, by not allowing us to have that easy answer, and by opening up spaces for deep understanding and exchange. But perhaps most importantly, films inspire change by telling stories that would not otherwise be told nor heard. Humans communicate by telling stories. That's how we understand our histories, our identities. Through stories, we learn lessons and we connect as humans. And on this basis, from our very stories, we can create our collective futures. The work ICRC does on the issue of missing persons and on the issues around missing migrants is little known and little understood. The anguish of not knowing the whereabouts of a loved one is one of the most excruciating and unbearable forms of human suffering. And yet this is not widely known. Madeleine's film, number 387, tells the complex story of human tragedy in migration. Her work helps us to humanize the migrant and his or her death, as well as the pain of that faraway family. She reminds us of what it means to be human. And in so doing, the film, number 387, influences public opinion and brings about behavior change, and perhaps even one day will lead to more humane government policies to migration. Today we have this incredible opportunity to connect the energy of everyone in this room, activists, filmmakers, films, policymakers, civil society, and funders, and to collectively move from art to impact on these issues that we all care deeply about. I would just like to take this opportunity to commend again Madeleine and Valérie. They have, through their work, made the invisible, deceased migrant visible. They've made the families in interminable waiting visible. They've made the forensic scientist's meticulous work visible, and the significance of dignity in death. They've made that also visible to us. Through their work, they help us see through the dark. They help us see things that we may not have wished to see, and have challenged us to care about the anonymous migrant, his or her family, and importantly, to reframe in our collective psyche the migrant. Number 387 and the impact campaign, Numbers into Names, confronts us with a highly complex problem of our time. one that has solutions, but those solutions too are highly complex, requiring international cooperation, science and technology, strong political will, and an acknowledgement of responsibility. Responsibility on the part of states, but also on the part of citizens, us all. Madeleine's work is a powerful tool for mobilizing interest, support, and change. And as we know and have been hearing, change is a team sport. So enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for bringing your point of view and why it's important for organizations like yours. This is really important, I think, for the people in the room who are filmmakers to know that there are potentially alliances that can be done in such a strong way. And now we will hear from the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, who's currently occupied by Michelle Bachelet, who opened the festival last Friday with a very strong speech about the importance of defending more and more human rights. So they are very strong partners of this festival. And I would like to ask Laurent Sauveur, Chief of External Relations, to join the floor and to tell us why this kind of work is important for his work and how it's possible to work with the High Commission for Human Rights when coming to films. Laurent.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Very honored to be here, and it's a pleasure to represent the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We call ourselves UN Human Rights now because Office of the High Commissioner is a bit jargonistic. But I think for me, and I haven't got any prepared speech, I'd like to give you, since this is the idea, my personal perspective on why it's important to actually join forces to tell the human rights story with you guys, filmmakers. We are living troubled times. This, you all know about that. We see the rise of populism, we see the rise of nationalism. We see more and more sophisticated communication strategies and tools to promote an anti-human rights discourse, which becomes so mainstream that we have leaders that are not necessarily the best of human rights being elected into office. And what I think the whole human rights community has come to realize is that we've not done a pretty good job at communicating human rights, and why these principles, which seem to be so much out of touch, are actually like the oxygen that we breathe. And like oxygen, you don't realize when you have it, but you actually feel quite a lot of pain when you're deprived of it. And I think now this whole community realizes that we need to be out there, we need to communicate much better, not about the organization, not about why Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, UN Human Rights, and so many others are the best of the best, and maybe with the fundraising objectives or else, but actually why the cause was human rights, why this is a cause that is worth fighting for. When you look at the research, you realize and hear, across countries, and it's probably a very broad statement, that that there's basically three categories when it comes to human rights or to an audience. You have the anti. It's going to be tough to change their mind, but they are a minority. They are the pro, and likewise tough to change their mind, but minority. And you have a big persuadable middle, a big belly in the middle. People who basically can be won over depending on the message, the messenger, the story that they're going to hear. And for us, this is where the discussion that we're having today is so important, because to to shift the attitude, to shift the behavior, to win the hearts and minds of this persuadable middle. It can have so much of a difference down the line when it comes to electing a leader or actually just taking action in one's community. Then films become a critical and one of the most powerful and compelling tools. I think we've seen great examples of films, that actually can really make a difference and have a great impact. I think, and it's been said, so I'm not going to repeat, but you don't only win hearts and minds with figures. You win hearts and minds with emotions, with stories. You need to have the right messengers when you speak to a specific audience. And all of this is something that you have the capacity to deliver, to produce. And this is why we're so interested in working with you. When it comes to my organization here in the Human Rights Office, so we're based in Geneva. We have 1,200 people across 70 countries. I can't say that we have one flagship example of us working with a filmmaker, because of course it's a bit sometimes complicated, and especially being the UN, there's some red lines that you have to respect, and I know that we're going to meet some of you in the afternoon, and we're going to discuss how we can work together. And of course, there's of course the let's say traditional exchange of resources, etc. But there's, from a communication standpoint, ideas we can have. We can screen a film at the UN as part of the side event on the Human Rights Council. We can use the UN social media accounts to promote a particular message. But of course, when working with the UN, and of course it's mainly the UN, I'm not talking about other NGOs, we need to have in mind that there is a political dimension. And I'm not going to give any names, but I've been approached by filmmakers who basically had a powerful story to tell. But they've had gone so far into the idea of the campaign and what they wanted to do with this film and their message, and they had approached us with almost a final product where we had very limited input. We could there was a very limited way to influence the message, or maybe the output, the outcome that we wanted to achieve. And that created, because of the political sensitivities that we are working around, very complicated to partner with this particular filmmaker. That should not deter you from approaching us, but I guess this is one of my plea, which is let's discuss at the onset. Let's shape together what a campaign can be, because indeed often a specific field is more complicated than what we hear, and there's always actions and things that are happening that is worth for you to take into account when building the campaign. So let's not, let's be involved from the very beginning, agreeing that there is an independent, and that's not a co-production, an independent editorial line. But the more you understand our concerns and our margin of maneuver, the better it will be. Voilà, I think that's mainly my message today. I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to discussing with some of you this afternoon. Thank you.
Merci Laurent, thank you. I think it was a very interesting transition to our next panel, which will, I hope, raise some of the questions that you were raising about editorial control, about different versions, about balance of these three elements that we were talking about. There is the film, there is the outreach, and there is the funding. And a successful campaign works when these three elements, in fact, come together in a balanced way, and nobody feels that it's been taken away too far from where he wanted to go in the first place, or the results that he wanted to reach in the first place. So it's my pleasure to invite on stage now the next panel, where we can have a discussions with some of the funders who came for this day. So please welcome Nina Spataro, Program Associate, International Human Rights Program of the Oak Foundation in the UK. Nina, can you please just sit here? Christina Johansson, Director, Solberga Foundation in the UK as well. David Koltnert, Project Manager of the Swedish Postcode Foundation in Sweden. Welcome, David. And to help me go through the different questions that we will be asking and the different points of view, I will ask the experts of this, which as you might know by now, the impact producers. So I would like to ask Ilse to come back on the stage, please. Ilse van Wansen, I don't introduce you anymore, and Celine Brockert, who is also an impact producer and who comes from Belgium, especially for our Impact Day. So we have called this this part of the last part of the session, what do funders want? We have seen this equation, and you're key, like everybody else. But we want to hear more a little bit more about what your motivations and needs and expectations are from this kind of collaboration. So I would like to start with you, Nina. So you work with Oak Foundation. Oak is an issue-driven foundation, and but you have an experience. You've been involved in quite a few number of film programs. So I would like to hear from you. Well, what does it mean concretely that, despite you're an issue-driven foundation, you still find films that you can be involved in, and how you're involved?
Sure. So I work for the International Human Rights Program at Oak Foundation. As you say, we are an issue-based funder. So the program focuses on 4 strategic areas, and those are ending impunity for gross human rights abuses, detention and immigration and criminal justice context, human rights defenders, and the rights of LGBTI people. And the types of interventions that we usually fund are documentation of abuses, litigation, advocacy, campaigning. We tend to give long-term core support. So why film? I think our traditional interventions are usually fact-based, so documenting, advocating based on facts. And that is at the core of what we do, and it is very important, but it tends to only reach kind of limited legal and policy circles. So the question is then, how do you engage a broader audience? And this is where comms strategy come into play, and outreach strategies. And I think film is a very powerful medium, and it engages people in an emotional way. It engages the emotional brain. And it drives action in a way that other interventions we traditionally support don't. So this is why we started funding film.
We've heard this word emotion many times today, so I think it's really one of the key words that we will bring back home. Would you want to talk a little bit more about one of, in particular, the projects that you have supported? I know it was Silence of Others that screened here at the festival last year, won an uncountable amount of prizes worldwide. What was your motivation to be involved, and what used you made of it in a way? How it served your purposes?
So The Silence of Others is a film that many of you in the audience might be familiar with. It tells the story of the first attempt in history to prosecute perpetrators of crimes committed during the Franco dictatorship in Spain. And you may know that there's an amnesty law in Spain that prohibits any such prosecutions nationally, at national level. Essentially a kind of state-imposed amnesia on even discussing these issues. So you kind of end up with this huge conflict that resulted in so many lost lives, so many enforced disappearances, kidnapped children, right? And no one can talk about it, and no one does talk about it. It's not kind of spoken about, and young people don't know about it. They're not taught in schools. So the silence of others really tries to bring this issue into the public domain. At the core of the film is this legal case. So some of the petitioners, because they couldn't bring the case in Spain, went to Argentina, and a judge there is investigating those crimes under universal jurisdiction laws in Spain. So that is at the core, and the film kind of shows the journey of those people, how they kind of try to have those processes in Spain, how they are stopped, and then they go further to Argentina. It's really a fascinating film, and the reason we wanted to support it is because as I say, we support a lot of documentation of gross human rights abuses and litigation, but we don't think about, how do people perceive those processes? I mean, because people kind of have a limited understanding, I think, and for good reasons, about what litigation is and kind of what the reasons for litigation is, what the impact is, and so it really aims to bring the issue in the public domain and help the Spanish public have that conversation about the crimes committed during the dictatorship, and to empower people to ask for steps to be taken to kind of change the amnesty laws, to overturn the amnesty laws. So we supported the post-production of the film. We then went on to support the campaign for an Academy Award, and we are now considering support for the Impact campaign. And really, the film did very well on the film festival circuit. It won over 15 awards. It was shortlisted for an Oscar for an Academy Award, and it recently also won the Goyas in Spain. So you end up having 3 million Spaniards watching the Goyas and kind of seeing that message coming from the stage. That this is something that happened to our country, and we have to know about it. We have to take action.
We have a short clip. We can see the trailer of the film of Silence of Others. The clip of the Silence of Others, please.
Es simplemente un olvido, una amnistía de todos para todos, un olvido de todos para todos.
Yo tenía 6 años cuando fueron a por mi madre. El sitio de la fosa, en la fosa.
Yo estoy obligado a convivir a escasos metros de donde vivo con la misma persona que me torturó.
Lo que pasa que no se ha destapado hasta ahora.
No hay pueblo en España donde no haya víctimas del franquismo, ¿no?
Queremos ser nuestros hijos, vivos o muertos.
No es algo que mira al pasado. Estamos peleando por el futuro.
Es la primera vez que antes de judicial la voz de las víctimas se va a escuchar y se escucha por 10.000 kilómetros de distancia de nuestro país, ¿no?
En esta causa hay varios protagonistas, pero el tiempo es uno de ellos.
Nosotros y centenares de miles de víctimas nos han negado el derecho a la justicia.
Quizá entre todos, todas, un poco quizá hemos colaborado en ese silencio.
Pregunta que es la vida. No la vida. Lo humano. Somos injustos.
Such a wonderful film, and we all remember it with a lot of emotion, and we also won a special mention at the festival last year from the jury, so it really has had a wonderful career. But I was wondering how you have used it how it has helped you reach your purpose as an organization.
We have a small but very kind of, powerful cluster of grantees that engage in universal jurisdiction litigation, and that is essentially a law that gives any state the right to investigate gross human rights abuses committed elsewhere, even though it has nothing to do with the crime. With the victims, the perpetrators, it has no jurisdictional links with the crime. And so for us, it was one kind of having this conversation in Spain and helping achieve change in Spain at national level. And the second reason for us supporting the film was, because it highlights in such a subtle but robust way the uses of universal jurisdiction, how states can use it in order to empower victims of these abuses that have happened all over the world. And there are so many post-conflict societies that kind of still deal with the results of with the legacy of dictatorships and the gross human rights abuses. So how can the states use universal jurisdiction to kind of help victims achieve justice and gain redress?
So for you was a good pick.
Absolutely.
Great.
And I also have to say, in 2018, the new socialist government in Spain said that they would take a number of steps, towards overturning amnesty laws, even. So, setting up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They promised that there will be exhumations of mass graves. So, there seemed to be momentum building kind of behind this movement. And now we are seeing again the right wing kind of entering, and fascist ideologies re-entering mainstream politics. And I think it's even more important for a film like The Silence of Others to bring this message: what happens when we are so divided, when we have fascist government ruling.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nina. I would like to come to you, David. So you are a project manager for the Swedish Postcode Foundation in Sweden, which is part of the Swedish Lottery, which invests. Speak at the same time.
Hello. Yes.
So tell us a little bit more how your organization invests in culture in general, in particular in films, and what kind of projects and films you look for, and mainly why you think this is important that your organization goes into the direction of investing in films.
Yes, yes. So I'm working for the Swedish Postcode Foundation. We're part of the Swedish Postcode Lottery, so it's not the state lottery, which is important in this case. There's many state lotteries also funding film, like in Britain, for example, but not in Sweden. All the money goes to sport and the state. I don't know if the postcode is an interesting setup. Many of the humanitarian organizations here are beneficiaries of the lottery in different countries. It's a Dutch invention from the beginning, and now it's in Holland, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, Germany, UK, and just starting in Norway. Combined, this is the third biggest private donor in the world. So it's on many fronts and many different initiatives. In Sweden, the big chunk of the money goes directly to the big humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, the Swedish Red Cross, the Amnesty, Greenpeace, and so forth. The foundation is a tool to spread the money even further to smaller kind of initiatives and organizations that can't necessarily be a beneficiary. So we work with project-based funding, issue-driven funding within different fields. Culture being one of them, but it's also sport, humanitarian issues, environmental, and nature. And we've been working within culture for almost 10 years now, in a broad sense, with all the means. It's theater, dance, film, with a joint aim of using culture as a tool for social and environmental change. And looking at film, we see that this specific area of using mainly documentary. It could be feature film as well, I guess, but as it's been developing, it's more a documentary-driven area, where we see being a funder who can only work time at a specific, maybe a year and a half. If we are in the starting of a production phase, we won't see the end result, like the impact and outreach, which is what we are at the core of what we are after. And we also see that there's hardly any money in that field.
Because you finance mainly impact campaigns, right?
Yeah, I would say that's what we want to do, like only impact campaign. But I know how hard it is for filmmakers to get their film ready and financed. So with that said, the project that we've been, it has been part production, but only a small part, because we are interested in really this, what comes after, what you've been talking about the whole day, what specific targets and aims and possibilities do you see for this film? And we want to be a part of that and support that full on. Like, we understand that this needs resources, this needs a specific producer, and we want to be supporting that.
You're talking about we want, but is that something you're trying to put in place, or what are the obstacles to go into that direction?
Yeah, as you've been saying, this is a growing field, but it's still very undeveloped. You've been saying it's here in the southern parts of Europe, but it's also in the northern parts. And we supported Doc Society, then it was called BritDoc, but they were trying to expand this area within the Nordic countries over a period of 3 years. We supported the program going from Norway, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark with this the program you presented earlier with educating impact producers and filmmakers, but also trying to get rooms like this together with people coming from different sides of the spectrum, the organizations, the NGOs, the experts who can try to open up the eyes on what we can do together with the film at the core. So we've been trying to support individual films, but also like the strategic of building this impact field within specific the Nordic and Swedish context, but it can also be in the international context.
And how do you scout the projects that you want to be involved with?
Yeah, we have an open application, so you can apply whenever, pretty much. And we have, it's quite many Swedish initiatives, but also internationally. So many of you, I know that there are organizations here like Better Cotton Initiatives, they have projects with us. So international NGOs can come to us with specific projects, but also international film projects can come to us. But here is this tricky thing. Since we are dealing with lottery funds, and each country, as you know, has very unique and strong legislation on this area on how can the money be used. In Sweden, it's money from the lottery and gambling can only go to like the common good causes. And in the eye of the law, it's only NGOs who we can support directly. The main partner of a project to us needs to be an NGO in Sweden or internationally. So this means a private production company can't be the main partner.
But here's the good news for the NGOs in the room who are wondering why they should partner with filmmakers, so that they can come and ask for funding.
Yeah, and we solved that in different cases. In Sweden, it's very common to have small local NGOs. So many of the filmmakers are part of an NGO as well that they can go through, or they have like the example I have. It's an NGO that is within this field. So for example, the number 387, it would be the Red Cross, with being the, could be the applicant, for example. So it depends, the setup, but you need, that's like a hard criteria. We don't have that many, but that's one
I
that
think
we can't get around.
it's very common to other foundations as well, that they need to fund non-for-profit organizations, and production companies are non-for-profit, not necessarily in a case. And I think you brought also an example. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more of why you went into this project and what was there for you and what you came out of it.
Yes, it's a project that's called See the Children, which actually contains 2 different films. It's called My Life, My Lesson, and Say Something. Maybe we should start with the trailer. It says quite a lot about what's it all about. So, trailer for My Life, My Lesson.
Pappa ringde när jag var och handlade.
Ja, han har ringt mig också.
Ja, jag kommer över och sparkar ihjäl din morsa typ så här och grejer.
Jaha, samma gamla vanliga.
Ja, men hur sen kan du vilja?
Felicia, jag sa att du inte skulle svara.
Ja, du, welcome back to Saltberga. Jätteäckliga minnen här, jag vet. Det där är som en kokain.
Jag ska få dig om.
Du har 4 barn som aldrig haft någon pappa. Vart är våran pappa?
Jag vill inte höra.
Ja, men Fanny, det är bra. Det kommer röva. Nej, men Fanny, det gör inget. För grejen är, han tog åt sig av det här. Han tog åt sig av sms'et.
Känner du hur hela skiten vibrerar? Det är inte kvar och det är någon som håller för kikhollar. Och så är det på skrivlådan.
Vadå, så vi barn ska anmäla pappa?
Och det han då säger, jag ska döda dig. Är du helt säker på att han har sagt så?
Ja.
Alltså grejen är, han sa också att jag ska slå ihjäl dig. Jag vill att du ska vara farlig, mamma.
Mamma älskar dig, det måste jag ha.
Hon ljuger.
Vad är det hon ljuger om då?
Om att jag har hotat henne. Och nu kommer hon att tro på vad hon säger.
We see a wide range of organizations that are attached to the projects. They all came together. Was that the producer who went and looked for them? How did that work?
Yeah, so this is a bit of an example like Ilses, that they from the beginning approached organizations working with this issue of domestic violence, and in this case seeing the children, that the children who are not the direct the victim of the violence, but they are the indirect and very strong victims, because they are in the next room, they are witnessing the violence, and it's causing enormous damage individually and also to the society. And there are numerous organizations working with this issue, like internationally we have Save the Children and many others. And they found a way to partner up. So these organizations, some of them, was part of the production. So they also funded the production. And we came along as, ideally for us, later in the stage when you had like preferably a finished film, but it could be like a rough cut stage and you needed to finalize, and you have partnerships ready and you know what you're targeting. In this case, they want to change the legislation in Sweden, so the children can be part of the juridical process. For instance, in Norway, this is the case. They can be I don't know the English term, but you know, no. Yeah. See, but it's also a very effective tool to reach all the different people and organizations and governmental bodies that are facing this issue. It can be the police, it can be the social worker, it can be the so many the doctors. So they've been using this, targeting all these kinds of different areas, and you screening the film and have a discussion afterwards. And they've been very much in line with trying to change that this domestic violence is going to be within the higher education for all these different professions, which it wasn't the case earlier.
So it was the producer carrying all these activities with the films.
Yeah. So that's how it worked. How they work. They work a bit like they see this as a core. This is the starting point. We need a joint collaborations. And the interesting with this is that it's still going on. This film was finished 5 years ago, and it's still ongoing. And they have new partners on board. So we were one of the big in the beginning. So it was started flying, and then it's just been going with new partners and new funders.
Did they manage to change the law?
It's up for a vote this summer.
Wow! So
soon
we'll be following.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. I'd like to go to Christina now. Christina Johansson, director of the Solberger Foundation. So Solberger is very new foundation, the new kid on the block. You were saying you just registered in January officially, so it's very fresh, which is also an interesting approach of your look at this whole environment and the fact that the new foundation can actually start and decide to go into impact financing. It's very interesting to hear the motivations behind. So you're already involved in quite a number of projects, I think, despite the short life. So I would like to hear, why did you decide to go into this direction, and what are your motivation as a foundation to fund this kind of projects? What are your expectations?
Yeah, great. So we are, like you said, incredibly new. We've been working in this, we're a family foundation, we're Swedish and British, but I have an American accent. We set up the foundation in the UK, and the family came together, and in this time of urgency around climate and gender injustice and racism and fascism and all the things you all know how terrible things are, and we felt that was an incredible responsibility to leverage our privilege and resources to support this kind of work. So we started by focusing on supporting the areas where typically it's harder to get funding, so more grassroots, more social movements, more activists who are working in these areas. And I found myself, as we started this journey, sending reports to my family and to the board, and nobody was reading anything I was sending. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's because I sent it on WhatsApp, so I'll send it on email instead. And nobody read the reports. And then I was like, okay, I'll do a board presentation and I'll talk about the reports, and nobody read the reports. But when I showed a film about the topic, and when people heard the stories and were able to connect, and especially for folks who are in that movable middle that we were just talking about in the previous presentation, for people who aren't strongly opinionated on one side or the other on these issues, or maybe that engaged, storytelling is such a underutilized tool. So having zero experience in the film world, we were able to connect with incredible people like Doc Society and Bertha Foundation and Influence Films, who kind of held our hands as new funders to figure out where can our funding be most useful to have the biggest impact possible in the areas of climate change and gender justice, and how can we lift up stories and support impact campaigns that can connect with those organizations that we're supporting on the ground, the grassroots organizations, and how can we leverage that and it's been an incredible journey as a new funder. The impact field is growing, that's our motivations behind it. We see this as a learning journey. As you said, it's January, so we're really new, but we are really excited to be in this space and see the incredible potential that storytelling has.
So the projects you pick, how do you choose them? You said you don't have a film background, so how you make sure that the films that you pick are the ones that can have the biggest impact?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've done that yet. But we, like I mentioned, some of the partners that we get to learn from and who supported us, the incredible thing about a new person in the documentary space is that I found that everybody has been more than welcoming. I mean, we're also a funder, so that's also why. But people are really like helpful to teach us and to share best practices and also mistakes. I've been incredibly humbled to see how people are so open to talk about areas that didn't work and films that didn't work out or impact campaigns that were they learned lessons from. But we have funded 2 films, an impact campaign. One of them, the Swedish Postcode Foundation has also funded. We learned about it at Good Pitch, which we heard about earlier, called Arika, and it's about. Somebody mentioned it earlier, but it's about Are we going to show the trailer? We can have the trailer. Okay, cool. So
that's very easier to explain.
Yeah.
Can we show the trailer of Arika, please?
Stor mängd giftigt gruvslam.
13 years ago, I followed the traces from my hometown in Sweden and the mining company Boliden to my country of birth and the Chilean desert city of Arica.
Många fall av cancer och missbildade barn.
Hay niños que mueren, incluso niñas embarazadas mueren la guagua.
The stories I was told were hard to hear.
¿Cómo le explico a todos tus hijos que su papá va a morir?
So I started asking questions from old managers.
Jag blir väldigt ledsen över det här. Hade jag fattat ett annat beslut så hade jag aldrig kommit hit något material.
And affected people.
Y si tengo algún día guagua, no sé cómo salir de ella tampoco.
The film sparked a fire, and a team of lawyers started working with the victims.
And now we've been here for a couple of days collecting evidence against the Swedish company Boliden.
Och lite grann den här typen av ärenden man hade framför sig när man startade risklinjen och företrädaren som var på stora.
7 years later, the Arica victims are taking Boliden to court in my hometown.
En advokat kommit för Boliden i det här målet.
Har Boliden någon del i att människor i Arica är sjuka och har dött?
Jag kan inte komma till den slutsatsen.
Now, our stories have a new meaning.
Är det någonting som du inte har sagt eller är det någonting som, eftersom det verkar ju så himla känsligt. Jag förstår inte riktigt vad som...
Herregud Lars, det är en rättsprocess han har startat.
And so much more is at stake.
Han har bidragit till att människor har dött, drabbas av allvarlig sjukdom. Det är inget att vara stolt över när man summerar vad man har gjort i sitt yrkesliv. Självklart inte.
Who gets to write history? And what is my role?
¿Usted qué opina?
Where do I draw the line between filmmaker,
¿Por qué le puse a mi hijo el nombre suyo?
friend, and fellow human?
Vi hade räknat med en annan utgång.
Is justice for all?
Personerna i Arica, man måste försöka ta till sig vad den här undersökningen och den här prövningen faktiskt säger.
Boliden vill försätta Arica victims i konkurs.
Ryktet om vår död är för tidigt. Nu kör vi i hovrätten.
Or is it all about the money?
Jag, Lars Edman.
Jag, Lars Edman, lovar och försäkrar.
Por mi honor y conciencia que voy a decir toda la verdad.
Ingenting förtiga, tillägga eller förändra.
I remember at the Good Pitch when they presented this project, somebody asked, why are you going back to the director? And he said, after 7 years, his previous film was done, he said something like, because my job hasn't finished yet. So this also brings up the question about filmmakers who are also activists, and their way of telling the stories is their way to change things on the field with the power of the storytelling. So that's very powerful trailer as well. So how will you be using, in brackets, this film? Do you know what kind of use you want to do, how you want to reach your goals as a foundation with the use of this film.
Yeah, I mean, we feel incredibly lucky to be able to support this film. It's incredibly powerful. As I mentioned earlier, we're Swedish family, and this is a story about a Swedish company that benefited from extreme toxic colonialism, which is a practice that many in the West, many companies and the West in general has benefited from at the expense of so many. And so we felt there was a really important story to be told here that is not just about Boliden, but is about many companies that do the same thing and get away with it. And so the story itself is incredibly moving, but the impact campaign is really inspiring as well. So that's where we're supporting the film, which is taking a more kind of journalistic, more neutral, trying to tell the story, which I think is the way, even though there is like an activist, maybe potentially element of the story of the director and who you saw in the film, the story is not trying to be, the film itself is not trying to take a strong advocacy position on this. They're trying to follow the court case in Sweden. The Impact Campaign, however, has a three-pronged strategy of a reparations project for the community in Arica. 3,500 people who have been massively impacted by the toxic waste there, and particularly women who their reproductive systems and have been affected, many women having stillborns, and you hear about this in the story. So this is a gender injustice story as well. And so there's a reparations campaign to support those survivors, and then there's also an accountability campaign and a prevention campaign at the kind of policy level with a UN binding agreement that they're working on. And so it's a really impressive team, and for us it's a learning opportunity as well to learn from these incredible impact campaigners, impact producers, and all the multiple campaigns that they're working with. And we love that it's also working on the ground with the communities in Arica, because as a new funder I get to hear all the critiques of the space and the way the funding is done historically, and there has been a lot of critiques that I've heard about a lot of funding perpetuating a colonialistic lens in filmmaking. And so what we were really excited about this film is that they are making sure that the stories are being, and the campaign itself is being led by communities most impacted. And moving forward, we hope that the films that we fund take that approach as well, and that they listen to, they don't extract stories, that they instead really try to lift up the voices on the ground.
Great. So we kind of set all the pieces now on the ground of the different aspects that have to be taken in consideration for an impact campaign. The players who are around the table virtually to make it happen, and we heard the motivations of all of them. So it's like we have a puzzle here now, or the pieces of the puzzle now, and we like the slide that we were showing before with the film in the center, and it's about putting them together in the right way. But I also would like to talk about more about the balance, because you were talking about the power of being a funder, which of course has a weight in this dynamic, but there is also the power of telling the story and the power of bringing it to the right people, because we realize that all these elements are indispensable for everything to fall in the right place. So I would like to hear a bit from our impact producers to how do they manage when you have so many multiple partners and multiple funders sometimes. How do you manage to make it work, and that everybody is, although we spoke about different versions are possible, so it's not necessarily the same piece of work that is going out to different audiences, and it's also important to say, because the formats can be different, but still, how do you make everybody happy at the end of the day? It's like a magic touch, right? Celine, you have an experience with a film that was shown here, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Kakuma, on the largest refugee camp in Kenya.
Yeah.
And that's still going on 3 or 4 years after delivery.
Since 2016, yeah. So I am Celine, I am the impact producer for Cassette for Timescapes. It's a production house of Morley
documentary films based in Ghent, in Flanders, in Belgium. So we produced 3 films on the theme of migration, of which The Invisible City Kakuma is the one on which we had the most active impact campaign. Lieven Korthout, he is the director of the film. He lived himself for 4 years in Kakuma refugee camp, which is one of the biggest refugee camps in the Horn of Africa. More than 200,000 people are living there, and every day new people are arriving, also from South Sudan. And it is an independent film, so it is not made in commission of an NGO or for any political party. It's really made because he passed by there. He lived before there in Ethiopia, and one day he passed by and he thought Kakuma was just a normal African city, as he will say in the trailer that we will watch afterwards. And then he entered there and he discovered that it's just a refugee camp, which could be a normal city. And he ended up staying there, and in his film he follows 3 unaccompanied minor children. And the fact that he stayed there for 4 years gives a totally different image of the situation as an NGO or just a reporter who is there for 1 week, takes some images and that's it. So you really are, we mentioned it already a couple of times, you're a lot of time with the subject, as you have a featuring film of somebody who is for a long time with the subject, that gives something totally different. Then there was the Good Pitch in Stockholm, I think it was in 2016, and that was at the same time the launch of our impact campaign there. The producer, Emmy Oost and Lieven, they understood the importance of the strength of having an impact campaign with this film, that it could really be an added value for a lot of other organizations. And I worked since a couple of months for them, and then they proposed me to do the impact campaign, which of course I wanted to do. And during that Good Pitch in Stockholm, we met organizations that they put us in contact with, and that's where it all started. One of the strengths of the film is as well that we are a small company, and Lieven on his side, he also does a lot of impact work. He has a lot of contacts as well, and we're really a strong team, and everybody's working together to get as many screenings as possible. And after that Good Pitch, we set it up 3 impact goals, which were make decision makers rethink the concept of refugee camps, because as Lieven, as I said, he thought it was a normal city, so can we not make normal cities of it? Also put the issue of refugee camps in Africa high on the agenda, because at that time all the attention was going out to Syria and Africa was a bit forgotten. And then there is also creating more awareness about living conditions of unaccompanied minors in the camp. And then we set it up 3 target goals, which are the schools, so educational side. There are all kinds of NGOs and organizations, and then there is the policy makers. And for each one, we started networking, and we had the advantage that many people are really touched by the film, and they really wanted to collaborate, because that's the way that we like to work most. It has to be a win-win situation. They have expertise, we have our film, and if we put both of these things together, it can be an added value for both of us. So for the schools, what did we do? We organized many screenings until today in Flanders. Along the way, I met an organization in Flanders or in Brussels, which is called Africalia, and they said, look, we are interested in funding you so you can translate the educational website that you made. You can translate it in French and in English. So we developed an educational website together with a festival who was interested in doing the whole educational side for us. And so they developed the website on which you have a whole introduction on the film, so the students receive it before they get to see the film. And after the screening of the film, we always organized a Q&A in presence of Lieven, and every time we noticed that 1 hour was not enough, because Lieven talks about people of their own age, so they recognize themselves very strongly in it, and it had really a big impact on them.
Sorry to interrupt. You mentioned the educational outreach. I think this is one of the points that are really important to go back with, also with the other people on the panel, because the education is kind of the beginning of the impact in a way. It's like where you start from to build awareness and culture, and so I was wondering if anybody on the panel had any experience with working with schools or working or using the films on an educational level, really like in the framework of the national schools, or is that something you've done, David?
Yes, for sure. As you mentioned, many of these campaigns has that element to it, and they join forces with, for instance, in Sweden example, there are numerous organizations that work within school with films, and they put together material. So, for example, these two, in this example I showed earlier, they have been working very successfully within the school system in Sweden and also in Norway, tackling but also educating the children about their rights and where they can, if they are in this situation, what can I do with it? So they have a screening, and at the screening they have a partner organization who runs, for example, like a emergency call hotline where you can call if you are witnessing violence at home, for example. So that's how you can push it further, not only lift the problem, but also go further, go deeper, which is very inspiring to be part of, and what we as a funder are very much looking for. It doesn't. All projects don't have to go to school. I mean, it's all about what is the film, what is the core, and who. But also limiting. You can't do everything. You need to.
Yeah.
What is the most concrete and plausible outcome, impact that we can do, and who we're going to partner with?
So probably different partners will do different things and use different formats to reach different goals. So to go back to this, I think I'm seeing that we're running out of time, and there is so much that we need to discuss in this panel. So, and I would like also to open a little bit up to the floor. So maybe we'll run 10-15 minutes late if it's okay for you. There's still lunch and the whole afternoon coming up, but so this will still work. But I think it's so much valuable experience and information on our panelists that I'm struggling between asking so many questions and letting you talk for hours, and also listening.
Don't, you can cut us off.
No, but there are real questions that we need to raise, and I wonder how this element of the editorial control, for instance, the fact that you all said that you trust the filmmakers completely, that they know their job and that they will deliver the best possible film. Is it an experience that the filmmakers have as well, that when you have multiple partners and multiple funders, can you still go your way, the way you want to go? And is that something that Lieven, for instance, and Ilse had an experience? You mentioned that before. I think it's important to stress it, that it's really it's about partnerships, and it's about trusting each other, and everybody has different expertise. That's really kind of like in a co-production, you have to trust each other, otherwise you can't really work together.
Yeah, I think because what you mentioned, it was an independent film Lieven made, but even if an NGO funds you, it can still be completely independent. I think this is something that what I mentioned before is something that is a bit of a taboo, I think, hanging around that, because a lot of times if an NGO gets involved, they don't have the expertise, so they also leave it up to you as a filmmaker. And I think there's also a difference in embedded journalists going along with an NGO or an independent filmmaker approaching an NGO with already a complete idea is different. Like if I would be asked by an NGO to go to a project and film that and everything would be funded completely, then of course they have editorial say, then it's more an assignment. For example, but if as a filmmaker you approach an NGO with your film plan and they step on board, they're already different levels, and I think then as a filmmaker, at least that's my experience, you don't have to lose any control over it. I think that is still something that is mixed up a bit, which is causing taboos, but I don't see any problems, and it's all about communicating about it and being clear about it.
Yeah, yes, and as Laurent was saying from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, NGOs, they do have their own internal video productions, so that's something else. That's where they have their editorial control, because that's where they used to communicate, but it's more about going into the issue that you share caring about and have an independent voice that talks about it, that will reach different, larger and better audience for the cause itself. So it's going back a little bit to the roots of why you're doing what you're doing, and not to control the way you do it, because otherwise you wouldn't need to go to a filmmaker to have that result. I was wondering if there were any questions from the room. I know the morning has been long and there's been a lot of information, but I see there are. So can we have some microphones in the room, please?
I can talk, maybe you will hear me.
But I think they're filming. Can we have the mics, please?
Hello, thank you very much, everyone. It's great to hear that there is funding and organization wanting to support a film sometimes early in the project.
Can you just present yourself?
Oh, sorry. Ronit Shapiro, One Nature Films, and I have an impact film, Sisters of the Wilderness. I'm the creator, producer, and impact producer. So my question is, my project is already in the impact campaign because I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to wait to find the funding. I do have lots of organizations that I started collaborating with at the outset of the project in South Africa, but they don't have funding. They are looking for funding. They are small organizations, so they cannot fund this project, but we are working together. So we started I launched the impact campaign last year in September in South Africa, but to be able to expand the project globally, I needed funding, I needed support, and so on. So I just wonder if any of the organization on stage or in the room also happy to get involved in an impact campaign that is already ongoing.
David.
They turn it off, turn it on. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, on the contrary, it's good if you can take turns, kind of. Many of these benefit from a longer period. Like the example I had, we were the original impact funder, but after us, they had another foundation have supported it, and so it can go on for years and years and have that deep impact. That was the initial idea. That, for example, changing the law. You don't do that in a tea break. It's gonna take some time. It takes, in this case, 5 years. So you can build the momentum, and then more partners can come along. And NGOs have a very specific here that they can rarely they fund. I understand that it's and we also want to inspire the whole foundation network, or in family foundations, private foundations, and public, that this is an area where you can put your money. It's just starting. I mean, but we really see the potential, and we want others to join.
There was another question just behind, I think. Yeah, over there. Can you pass the mic, please?
Hello, Sophie Mulfin from Happy City Lab, and we're developing an impact project which is currently in the works, which may have a film component to it. My question was, somebody mentioned failed impact strategies, and I was wondering if there's some kind of broad key points, that pitfalls to avoid, or examples we can learn from, and if somebody would want to.
Anybody wants to share mistakes they wouldn't make again? It's always useful.
Mistakes, I think, like with every campaign you set up, you will come across hazards or things that you maybe when you evaluate later you would do differently. I think something that we always feel that is lacking is monitoring and evaluation. It's also difficult to fundraise that. But in the end we do need it because we want to have figures as well to measure, even though it's difficult to measure. So I think that's definitely something every time we see, okay, we should have done this better, even though we thought about it. Like in practice, measuring impact with film is always difficult, especially if you talk about rural areas. And like sometimes we have had the project that we're setting up now in South Sudan, that we actually had partners on board in the beginning, and I think we worked with them for a year on the project, but at the end we just felt it wasn't going anywhere. There was lacking commitment, which is fine. We just started over again. So, you know, in filmmaking you need to have a very, very long breath, and that starts with funding your film. But it's also, you know, you're dealing with stories and people that can change, like wars that will erupt and that will sort of toss everything around. So you have to constantly be flexible. And that long breath you also need with making the impact, because, you know, it doesn't go by itself. You have to really, really push and pull on every single thing. And also, if you already have your impact campaign, you know, running, like a lot of times it will be funded for 1 or 2 years, for example, by an organization, but then their period runs up. So to answer your question, that means that it shouldn't, or it has to stop. You know, you can apply again, but that is this long breath. If you really see the potential in your impact campaign, and you see the potential that it can have a long life, then you just have to start again over again to knock on doors and to find new partners that can stretch that life, or that can adapt the project so that it can run again, or maybe run in a completely different situation. I think that has to be sort of the flexibility in how these roads will go, and partners will, you know, one partner can step in at the beginning, but then another one only finds out 2 years later that this great project is existing and fits with them. So, yeah.
One thing to join the different communities that are working, for example, the Doc Society. They have the impact field guide. It is packed full of cases and examples, mostly good, but I think also like detours. And there are national similarities in Sweden, for example, that you're not alone. You don't have to invent the wheel every time. And if you get the chance to apply for Good Pick, for example, that's a great opportunity to be able to meet others who are in the midst of creating an impact campaign, or that has a long, where you get really external eyes that can, with their experience, trying to help you.
Yeah, and I also can confirm that it's as you say, very important to actually an impact campaign is a product of constant auto-evaluation. So at a certain point, the world is also changing. You made a film which is there, but the reality on which you were filming is changing, and you have to adapt yourself also on that, and your impact goals have to adapt on that. In our case, since 1 year there is a big focus on unaccompanied minors in Europe, so we decided to focus merely on that. And so to continue a little bit about the project, next to the film we also developed an interactive web documentary, Find Me in Kakuma, which you can visit. If you Google it, you arrive on it, and you get to know much more about the life of unaccompanied minors in the Kakuma refugee camp. But in the same time, and I'm happy that the ICRC is here, because even when he was there in the camp, there were two things that he discovered. There were the big number of unaccompanied minors, but also the fact most of the people in those camps has a mobile phone. And so he thought, couldn't we develop something that makes it much easier to connect people again with each other? And he had the idea of developing a mobile app. We had a testing period. But as we are documentary makers, we didn't have the facilities to develop it further. And the International Red Cross has the mandate of UNHCR to do the tracing. We met them thanks to the Good Pitch in Stockholm, and they now took over from us the app. They will develop it further and implement it in all the refugee camps worldwide, just to also illustrate how an idea of one single person can one day influence in a positive way the lives of many. And just to say that you don't have to see it as a failure of if you don't see it as a failure, it is just an opportunity to reinvent yourself and to see new opportunities, and to don't be scared to talk to people, to ask questions, and it's always a win-win in that sense.
Great. I think we have to. Sorry, I know there are questions, but we really encourage you to stay with us for the whole day. And it's not a menace; it's just the way we thought about it. Because now we have time for lunch outside. Everybody's invited, and all the speakers will be there. To continue all this discussion. And then in the afternoon, starting from 2, there is a certain amount of projects that have been selected and that have a certain amount of meetings that have been scheduled downstairs at the Café Babel. But for all the others, the story continues, because there is at 2:30 Hussein Karamboy, who's the programmer for documentaries at the Sundance Festival, who's a member of our jury, who will be here to speak about his work and how he chooses the documentary. So that will be still very interesting. And then from 4 to 5, we have Celine and Lina Badanes, who is another impact producer, who will be downstairs to meet with the producers who are interested, to ask questions, to learn a bit more, and to ask all the things that we haven't been able, unfortunately, to ask now, because the time is running and we still have a packed day. But I would really like to thank you, everybody, all the speakers, all the people who came all the way to Geneva to this. We'll be speaking about the Good Pitch very much. It's amazing, we love it. But I hope that there will be also other places where impact producers, foundations, organizations, projects can connect to each other. Because if this goes on, there will be needed more space for more projects to find the right path, to have an impact. So any occasion that we can organize, facilitate, let's try to do it. Let's try to do it together as much as we can, and hopefully this place will become one of the places where this will be one of the meeting points throughout the year, where people interested in impact will come back. So I would like to thank you all again for staying with us. I guess everybody's hungry and thirsty and need a break, but well, this is the end of this morning.